It's no secret that Atlus has never shied away from trying to fit in with the cool kids in order to reach a wider audience. But what if I told you that they'd go as far as to create a kid-friendly version of the Shin Megami Tensei series? That's right, back in the late 90s to mid-2000s, Pokémon and Yu-Gi-Oh took over the market, with everyone lining up to buy the latest cards, games, and merch. As a result, the video game and traded card game markets were flooded with clones, with some actually being quite good. Others, not so much, with one of these clones coming from Atlus, who decided to dive into the kid-friendly market with their Devil Children series, better known as Demikids. Shin Megami Tensei games tailored to younger audiences, blending the franchise's darker elements with a more accessible experience. Though the Demikids games don't quite measure up to the games they try to emulate, the questions whether they're competent clones, and more importantly, how they compare to the rest of the Megaten series, remains largely unanswered. And that's exactly what we're going to look at in this video, taking a closer look at the first installment of the Demikids series, Shin Megami Tensei Devil Children, Black Book, and Red Book, and see how they stack up against the rest of the games in the Megami Tensei series. Make sure to subscribe and leave a like on the video, and I'll forever be at your service. Now, Demikids as a whole is a bit of an oddity to me. Despite only 2 games being localized to the West and remaining unknown outside of Japan and the hardcore Megaten fanbase, the series had a surprising level of success, actually managing to carve out a niche for itself without much difficulty. Being introduced in 2000 with Demikids Black Book and Red Book on the Game Boy Color, alongside the Shin Megami Tensei Devil Children anime. The echoes of Pokemon's charm mixed with the Shin Megami Tensei themes resonated with players, sparking enough interest for a PS1 remake, as well as other sequels, a manga, more anime adaptations, and even a card game. Which, I'll be honest, I don't know if the series was worthy of all that success, but good for Atlus. The games focus on a collect and battle appeal and have dual releases similar to how we saw with Red and Blue, Gold and Silver, and so on. And unlike Pokemon, where the dual versions differ in mainly exclusive Pokemon and minor changes, Demikids offers a stronger story with different narratives, protagonists, and distinct mechanics between the releases. I have to admit, as much as this makes it a total bitch to review, Demikids Black and Red Book both bring a surprising amount of charm to them, managing to hold themselves as fun, entertaining, and feel-good games, despite being geared for a younger audience. The easy-to-grasp narratives, combined with some mostly user-friendly gameplay and nice use of its visuals and artwork, make it pretty easy for anyone to pick up this game with little to no trouble, which is a big reason why they left a positive impression with many reviewers. That isn't to say that things don't get messy from time to time, with some core mechanics feeling too scaled down even for kids, while the different mechanics in each version may be overwhelming or introduce a learning curve, and their failure to fully capture what made Pokemon so beloved occasionally makes the experience a bit shaky. In the face of these issues though, both games manage to come off as their own, keeping me engaged with its cutesy charm. It's not that either has some grand narrative or intricate gameplay, it's very much a Shin Megami Tensei game made for kids, covering 2 fairly linear storylines that interact with each other with clear goals and fewer of the complexities that are often found in other Megaten games, cutting out the fat if you will, and you'll definitely notice where the game takes its inspirations for its concepts from Pokemon. But it still preserves its Shin Megami Tensei-esque identity that leads to both narratives having good story direction in my opinion, following one of 2 protagonists, Setsuna or Mirai, 2 students who after being gifted a Devil Riser, a device that allows them to summon demons, end up entering the demon world with different motivations. Depending on the version you choose to play, your protagonist will change, with Black Book focusing on Setsuna on a rescue mission to save his brother who has been taken to the demon world, while Red Book follows Mirai, who tries to prevent her world and the demon world from being destroyed by a mysterious devil child, all while searching for her father. Though the 2 characters embark on different journeys, the games share many similarities and key characteristics, with the 2 gathering specific keys to unlock new areas, having strange visions of a mysterious figure, and are accompanied by a demon companion throughout their journey. They also interact with several events and characters, and are ultimately faced with choosing one of 3 possible paths. That said, the subtle differences between each version add a nice touch to the experience with their exclusive areas, different starter demons, and varied gameplay mechanics, which we'll touch on later. Personally, I find that the dual protagonist approach, with Setsuna rescuing his brother and Mirai trying to find her father, adds variety and replay value since it allows you to see the same story but through different perceptions. Their background being orphans also brings an interesting dynamic that adds character to them, and is used to set up some story and character development, tying them together with some big reveals. I also appreciate that both games weave in the actions of the other protagonist. This broadens the scope of the story and gives the impression of a much larger, interconnected world than what's initially presented. I also found there to be a nice balance with the storytelling and dialogue that made the game far more engaging than I anticipated. Though my greatest appreciation with its storytelling is how easy it is to follow and keep track of the main points, with the game literally highlighting the key details in the face of the player with its close-ups of the character. It also aids in establishing some stronger personality in the characters that brings a bit more development throughout their journey. On top of that, some of the minor dialogue is actually pretty funny, and I got a good laugh out of it every now and then. If you can understand Japanese, then you might walk away with a bit more appreciation than just going through this game with a guide. There's a clear direction in how each version lays out its narrative, doing a good job revealing key details about Mirai and Setsuna's background, and also sharing details about the supporting figures in the world that not only build up its story nicely, but help liven up the fairly linear exploration in the game. With that said, the game's design is a bit of a letdown in terms of exploration. I was hoping for a more open world where players could take in the environment at their own pace. Instead, most of the game revolves around moving from point A to point B, with only a few side areas scattered around to explore, as most paths that lead to the next town are just a narrow road that don't branch off in a grand sense and make the demon world feel small and less impressive than I would have hoped for. While the limited exploration is still utilized effectively for story progression, unveiling new details that keep you engaged, it would have been nice to have a bit more freedom to wander around. Given the game's collectathon nature, more areas to explore with interesting NPCs or legendary demons hidden away somewhere to search for and build up the demon world's atmosphere would have been nice. Visually, the demon world isn't that bad though. I just wish there was more than what's already been added. There's still some unique aspects that aren't necessarily special, but fun. With the dungeon-like areas and your starter demon having abilities to either fly over or jump over certain terrains or obstacles is also a nice touch. And since each game has their own exclusive places or certain themed elements, things do feel unique. Though, if you're only going to play one of these games, which I'm sure most kids did at the time, this difference truly doesn't matter. And I think it's a wasted potential of not making the demon world big enough. Really though, given how well the story and characters are developed, the issues with the limited exploration feels like a minor concern, especially once the rest of the core gameplay begins to take the center stage. Which is relatively straightforward, though that doesn't make it completely stress-free, with the game's general ease, cramped menu UI, and some unique mechanics being a mixed bag at times. It plays effortlessly for the most part, offering fun moments and occasional challenges to keep the players engaged, additionally finding some similar vibes to Pokémon, with the party and combat system taking the forefront, presenting some tough moments that aren't difficult to overcome but require a bit of change in strategy over the course of the entire game. With your party being managed with your Devil Riser, a key device similar to a Pokédex that stores and summons demons to use for battle. Later in the game, an upgrade is available to store more or stronger demons in your party. As expected, you'll also be able to manage the rest of the game's settings, view your party's status and magic, and use items with these devices. Personally, I find the concept behind the Devil Riser to be great, but its features and upgrades aren't as integrated into the gameplay as they could be. The menus also can get messy, but it's manageable for the most part. It's still a really neat system with a lot of potential for the sequel games. Although I'm not quite sure why they thought the design being a gun was perfect for a game targeting children, but I like the way it looks, so I really can't complain here. That said, as much as I like the concept of the Devil Riser, this is also where the game takes one of its biggest and most frustrating liberties, with the game locking your starter demon at the top of the roster, so that's always in battle. From my experience with the Demikids games so far, this seems to be like a common theme, forcing you to use that game's mascot demon throughout the course of the entire game. Though it's definitely not as frustrating as some mascots in later games, it still limits the party customization options and combat experience, feeling like a missed opportunity to give more freedom, especially when comparing the games to Pokemon that allow the players to get rid of their starter at any point. Of course, if you really want, you can avoid using this demon if you just kill it off and refuse to revive it, but it still takes up a spot in your party. That issue aside, your starter demon's not only a crucial figure story-wise, but is also a top-tier demon when it comes to combat, so there's a clear advantage to keeping them alive. As far as combat goes, this is pretty standard for the series, not doing anything too out of the ordinary, bringing a quick pace that's met with a limited experience at times. It's still fun nonetheless. Similar to other Mega 10 games from this era, enemy encounters are random and the same turn-based flow, with the options to attack, use magic, or recruit demons are used during battles. However, it's easy to point out some noticeable differences with its cuter presentation and 2-on-2 battle system. Keep in mind that its new presentation shouldn't be taken lightly, with enemies overall being pretty hard-hitting. You'll also run into the occasional level spikes or some heavy-hitting boss fights if you don't have the right party. They just aren't as soul-crushing as Whitney's Miltank and Gold and Silver. This doesn't mean the game's difficult, but it's a perfect example of how looks can be deceiving. While its adoption of a 2-on-2 battle system does bring a quicker pace to combat and balances out the issues of always having your starter demon out in the field, I'm indifferent about its incorporation. Don't get me wrong, the combat is still a lot of fun, and I love the demon designs and simplicity behind the battle mechanics. But for me, I don't see how this changes the dynamics of combat in a unique way. It's essentially a streamlined version of the usual combat system, speeding up battles but causing damage to stack up more quickly, leading me to burn through MP and items for healing, which isn't uncommon to see for a Mega 10 game, but feels out of place for a more kids-friendly title. Again, in no way does this make the combat bad, but it's not reinventing the wheel in any sense. I think with a few tweaks and added features it could be a lot better, which is probably the case for the sequel games. That said, while I'm indifferent with its 2-on-2 battle system, I am very much in favor with the decision to add descriptions of what each skill does on the screen while in battle. This single-handedly saved me from so much stress, as even for someone who plays a lot of Megami Tensei, like myself, can sometimes blank on what some skills do. Even with its clunky menus, most battles moved extremely quick because of this. It's also worth mentioning that descriptions for items were also added. I know that this was added because of the targeted audience, but honestly, this should have been the standard for every Megaten game, especially the early mainline games like Shin Megami Tensei 1, 2, and If. Though, despite a fairly solid experience overall, something was holding combat back at times. While the starter demon being locked in your party takes away from the sense of personalization, it's at least addressed with the battle system and reduces most of the drawback. But combat is also affected by the way leveling up works in the game, as leveling up feels like a confusing, overly complicated process that hinders the combat experience, with only the protagonist leveling up from battles, which doesn't contribute to a whole lot beyond having a level cap when it comes to fusing. While demons level up, inherit stats, or learn new skills by fusing them with other demons. Honestly, this is one of the aspects that really confuses me. Not only does this mean that there are two systems when it comes to gaining levels, but only your protagonist, the one who isn't fighting, gains experience from combat. It just feels like an unusual choice. While I understand this places a heavy emphasis on recruiting and fusion, these systems also come with their own set of issues and vary depending on the version you play. After mixing all of these problems together, they begin to interfere with the game's accessibility, undermining what the game should be, a fun collectathon where you get to choose your own party and not take an extra step to get stronger. While it's easy to argue that this approach aligns with the Megami Tensei series' identity, it feels like a missed opportunity to really break away from this mold and give more freedom to the players, making its fairly entertaining combat limited, with these issues bleeding into the recruiting and fusion systems. As these already come with a few problems on their own, though still remain effective and straightforward, adding a lot of value to your party. However, the variation in fusion systems between releases, along with the simplistic, repetitive nature of recruiting, can detract from the experience, with Redbook's fusion being the most glaring example, bringing a learning curve and amplifying the issues on how leveling up works in the game, as instead of following the traditional fusion systems often associated with Megami Tensei games, it emphasizes strengthening demons by fusing one with another, similar to Element or Mitama fusion. Using this as a minor aspect of fusion works well and doesn't prevent any major issues, though in my eyes, using it as the primary fusion system brings an underdeveloped tone, as your only source to add new party members is resorted to recruiting. On top of that, stats for your demon won't be shown until after the fusion, leaving you left in the air on if fusing these two demons are even worth it. Having new skills to inherit once a demon's stats have been strengthened a bit is worth some praise, but it isn't enough to make up for the issues it does present, and feels like an unnecessary attempt to fix something that isn't broken. While Black Book just adapts a fusion system similar to other Megaten releases, by taking two demons to fuse them for a stronger one. There are a few issues, but they're nowhere near the level as the ones in Red Book. It's clearly the more accessible of the two when it comes to demon fusion, and it brings a familiar feel to other Shin Megami Tensei games while remaining easy to grasp for new and younger players. Though the fusion disparity between each version does stir things up, recruiting stays consistent and is much simpler. Sometimes a little too simple if you ask me. Being based on luck and involving little strategy, it can feel repetitive rather quick. There isn't much to do with it, with the player only selecting the demon they want to recruit and then watch 3 different icons flash over them. If the last icon it lands on is a positive emotion or symbol, then the demon will join you, and more often than not, this will be the case, as recruiting seems to heavily side with the player. And as I'm sure you can guess, if the last icon is negative, then the demon will leave or fight, though this doesn't happen that much. There are times where you may need to offer some money after this stage, but this is very rare, and given the nature of the game, it's not a significant amount to make you really second guess yourself whether to recruit that demon or not. There are a handful of demons that join you after clearing certain stages of the game, but other than that, there are no other negotiations, and it won't take long for you to have an army of demons that can be fused. That said, while its extremely friendly system is convenient, I do think recruiting could have been a lot better. The concept of negotiations is probably something difficult for a younger audience, so having the success rate of recruitment being based on enemies' HP would have encouraged players to take in the full experience of combat and recruiting. But in reality, demons can be easily recruited at the very beginning of the battle. With all that said, though improvements can easily be made to both systems, there's still enough to complement what the game is trying to go for. Though I think Black Book does it a bit better. Though this is a more budget-friendly title, it's still impressive visually for the Game Boy Color. Sure, its cuter presentation may be an initial turnoff for some, and I get that. But like I mentioned earlier, looks can be deceiving, and this shouldn't detract from all the good qualities the games do bring, with both the demon and character sprites standing out as bold designs that rise above any initial thoughts that most might have on a game geared towards younger children. On top of that, the mature demeanor of the protagonist contributes quite a lot to the story. It's also nice to see a budget-friendly Megaten title utilize original concepts that aren't recycled throughout the game. In contrast to Revelations the Demon Slayer, which reuses a lot of its demon sprites and struggles with a lighter narrative, Demikids offers more original and consistent concepts. Also, for those interested in a deeper dive into one of the first localized Megaten titles, be sure to check out my review on Revelations the Demon Slayer. While the demon world is a bit narrow-minded in terms of exploration, it still brings some appeal with its themed designs for each area and pretty interesting dungeons. These might not be the best dungeons from a Megaten game, but they still get the job done. The soundtrack also complements the game in these areas well, despite being nothing more than your run-of-the-mills Game Boy Color music. It's still enjoyable nonetheless. As expected from this dual release, each game does have exclusive tracks, which I think could be purchased at the shops scattered around the demon world, but I'm not 100% positive. Feel free to let me know in the comments down below if this is true or not. And while I can praise how well the Game Boy Color game looks, plays, and sounds, the PS1 port further improves upon this by adding new story elements, upgraded visuals and animations, music, and voice acting. Unlike how the Game Boy Color titles have dual releases, the PS1 combined both games together, making it much easier and cheaper for players to get their hands on both. If you're looking to get into the Demikids series, then I'd recommend picking up the PS1 version. It's not only the more accessible option, but the better one overall in my opinion. Though the Game Boy Color games are also great in their own right, just not as polished. Whichever version you play, both offer a surprisingly refreshing take with its lighter tones on Shin Megami Tensei, providing much more than what you might expect. With that in mind, let's wrap things up and see if these games are passable Pokemon clones, as well as where they rank on our tier list. When it comes down to it, Demikids Red and Black Book are quirky Megaten entries offering a unique, though imperfect take on the franchise. Though neither title is groundbreaking, they do provide a pure, nostalgia-like gaming feel that's hard to replicate in modern titles. And ultimately, that's really all you can ask for. There are a lot of cool ideas that both games bring to the table, as well as a few that don't pan out. Both manage to provide a fun, charming experience that stands apart from the games that they do try to clone. The simple narratives are amplified effectively through the storytelling, character close-ups, and development. However, issues with the different mechanics, party limitations, and weird level up systems present a noticeable learning curve, though they don't detract from the overall enjoyment the games bring. And I think that they do enough to not only be considered good Pokemon clones, but also get a recommendation from me. Even though the games are in Japanese, I think that anyone can get some form of entertainment from them. In terms of how they stack up against the rest of the Megaten games we've taken a look at so far, while these games aren't revolutionary, they still manage to carve out a unique niche within the Megaten franchise, landing it firmly in the C tier. They may not be as well known or popular, but that doesn't mean they're bad. I can't say the same for the later Demikids titles, but we'll get to those reviews down the line. With that said, let me know what you think of Demikids Black Book and Red Book, or the Demikids series as a whole. If you have a game you want me to review next, share that as well, and I'll forever be at your service.